بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Inshallah, in today's talk on the life of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, today is the third talk. We will talk about, as I mentioned in the previous talk as well, a little bit of a summary from the last week talk, so we have some continuation. Then in today's rest of the talk, we'll talk about the closeness of Uthman bin Affan with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then his different parts of life when he was with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his role in those specific things, whether it was a battlefield, whether it was a social life or economics life, whichever aspect of life we talk about. So today we'll talk about his participation in different campaigns or the different ghazawat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That includes Battle of Badr. We'll talk about his absence in Battle of Badr and the reasons behind it, and what kind of false claims, unfortunately, they exist out there to talk about Uthman, which is in general incorrect. And then we'll talk about his role in Ghazwat Uhud, and then about the Ghazwa against the Ghatafan, which is the Dhu Umar and the Dhat Riqa. Now, as far as previous week goes, we talked about a few things about the life of Uthman, including his marriage to Ruqayyah radiallahu anha, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we talked about the different kinds of persecution the Sahaba were going through, and Uthman bin Affan went through from his uncle. And then Uthman bin Affan, he migrated to Habasha. And during the Habasha, the kind of knowledge and qualities that Uthman bin Affan gained from his migration to Habasha, that includes his connection to the Deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the Iman, that made him stick with the Haqq, and all those persecutions that whether he went through or other Muslimin went through, that did not deter them away from the Deen of Islam. And besides that, the migration itself trained him well for many other things, including his steadfastness in situations which are not that familiar for the people who migrated there, Uthman bin Affan, including other Sahaba like Ja'far radiallahu anhu, Musa ibn Umair. And we see in the future, later on after the migration back to Medina, what kind of different roles these Sahaba played, including Uthman bin Affan, who became a Khalifa, the third Khalifa of Islam after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we talked about his connection to the Quran. And when we talked about his connection to the Quran, we discussed that he was the Sahabi who recited back the whole Quran to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was a Hafiz al-Quran, but in a manner that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the one who listened to the Quran from him. And he was one of those people who were reciters of the Quran until he died, until he was martyred, to the point when his house was besieged, and he was still at that time, even he was reading the Quran, to the point that even as we mentioned, that some of the blood stains of Uthman are still present on the Quran that he was reading. And was mentioned about how much recitation of the Quran he used to do, to the extent that his Quran was very well used, to the point it was like tearing apart. And we talk a few quotes from Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, and we mentioned that when we talk about his quotes about Uthman, we have to remember that they are not just out of thin air. Rather, it was because of his company to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that made Uthman bin Affan to come up with those quotes, and they are We can look for many of those quotes are backed up by a hadith or the ayat from the Quran. It's just his summary or his way of presenting the very same ideas. And we talked about, just I'll skim through it because it's important to be revise these things. The 10 things, for example, he mentioned that are the greatest waste of time. That included a scholar whom people don't go and ask questions, meaning his knowledge is useless now because people are not using. Yes, it's that knowledge, inshallah, will provide him the Jannah, inshallah, because he will, if he applies the knowledge in his life as well. But besides that, is that knowledge that is not acted upon. People gain knowledge, but they don't act upon it. So that's a waste of time as well. All the time that is spent to gain the knowledge, but it's not acted upon, it's another waste of one of the greatest waste of time. And then a sound advice that is given and that is not acted upon, it's not accepted by the person. And that's a very common thing that we find even nowadays, that people will accept that even the advice you are giving or somebody is giving to somebody, they will accept it that this is the right thing to do. At the same time, they will not act upon it. They will say that, yeah, you continue, go ahead and do it, and I'll watch from the sidelines how you get it done. Like even, for example, today there's not a Muslim would disagree that the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be implemented in the form of a state. We all know that this is one of the basics of Islam. But when you talk about it as a role that each one of us have to play, then they will accept that this is a very good advice, but at the same time, you go and carry on. As if that carrying on by the others will fulfill the obligation from from you. So this is an obligation. That's what it means by good advice is not accepted. You know there's a good advice, a sound advice, but it's not accepted. Weapons that is not used. Look at the Ummah. We are 55 plus states. At the same time, we find that the Ummah is at the mercy of the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or those weapons which are supposed to be used to defend the Ummah, the very same weapons are used against the Ummah. That's the reality we are living in. That's what I mean by Uthman is saying, that weapons that is not used, it's not a use of a weapon if it's not used in the right manner. It is used to bring the justice, to be merciful on the people by the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. That's what it means by that. Then a masjid that is not prayed in. Masajid, many of the masajid, we know that we go to a masjid and the masajid are empty. And of course, when we say masajid are not prayed in, is not only the masjid is not only a place for salah. It is more than that, and we can see that in the life of Rasulullah and later on in the Khulfa Rashidin and the Sahaba, Tabi'in, and Tatabat Tabi'in, the Salaf that we call them, we can see in their lives how the masajid were utilized. Masajid were not like those big castles that we see nowadays. They are very nice buildings. Even the chandeliers, some of the masajid have hanging, which are hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of chandeliers are hanging. But masajid are built so tall, lofty. Alhamdulillah, they look nice and all those things. But the purpose of a masjid is to prepare the personality who follow the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who become the abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the true slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they find out that's whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. So that's, we have to think about it. This is something good of a reminder. That's why I'm repeating these 10 things, even though sometimes you may think of it, 10 seems a big number. At the same time, it's easy to remember. The 10, we have 10 fingers. Remember each point on each finger, inshallah, it will benefit us all. Number six thing mentioned in his saying was a mushaf that is not read from. And I gave the example last week as well. We find them even bookshelves. We find them on the highest places in the house. We make special shelves for the copy of the Quran. It's so high that your hand cannot even reach. You put a stool or you put a ladder or you put a chair or something to reach the copy of the Quran. And then because we don't even reach those copies of the Quran, we put the cover on it so the dust does not reach either. That's the status of the Quran, unfortunately, is becoming. Not only that, it has to be connected to the previous one. A sound advice not acted upon. The Quran can be read, Quran can be studied, and knowledge is gained, but it's not acted upon, then it becomes useless as well. So the Quran has to be read and has to be acted upon as well. in totality, not start taking parts and bits and thinking of we are following the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. Then the wealth from which nothing is spent in the charity. So if the wealth is not spent in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it becomes in reality as what we spend on ourselves, the clothes or the food that we eat or drink, and then the food is secret and the clothes, they become torn apart later on in our life. So the only wealth that we are really keeping is not even our own wealth. This is the wealth of the inheritors. And like the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about that. The people love, the meaning of the hadith is that people love the wealth of the inheritors. And Sahaba were surprised, as if that's not the case. But that is the case. But most of the time, people are counting and keep counting how much more the bank balance is getting bigger and bigger, or how much gold that they have collected, or silver, or whatsoever. And they are not realizing that that's not even their own, that this is the wealth of the inheritors. They are the one going to inherit and then use them. You did not even use them. The only wealth that really means something, the one that's spent in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Uthman said, there's wealth from which nothing is spent in charity. Number 8, a horse that is not ridden. Horse comes under many different categories, whether these are the cars and the motorcycles and these kind of things we have, which just sit sometime in the garages for most of the year, and people take them out. Or they could be those horses that were used in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the past. So today you can have tanks and the airplanes and all those things, but they are just sitting there. They have no use in reality. They are supposed to be for using to defend the weak, defend the poor, defend the one whose rights have been taken away, not to become a bully. So again, it's a great advice from Uthman bin Affan. If that's the case, then it's a waste of time to have these kind of things. Number 9, the knowledge of zuhud or asceticism in the heart. In the heart, person says, I want to be very righteous, I want to be pious, I want to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but his actions are only to gain the world. It's a waste of time again. Number 10, a long life in which no preparation is made for the journey to the hereafter. What is the use of the long life if it's not spent the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to prepare for the hereafter? There was a Sahabi in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of the battlefields, he came, he was not a Muslim, and he asked, what if I become Muslim and fight and die? What's going to happen? He said, Rasulullah said that you'll get the Jannah. And he fought, and he was a martyr. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he did little, but he gained a lot. So he received, he did not pray a single rak'ah. Did not pray a single rak'ah. And he will enter into Jannah. Subhanallah. Does not mean that we miss Salah. That's not what it meant here. It meant is whatever time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him, he utilized it for the hereafter. Yes. That's the idea here. Okay, now moving forward, as I said, I just want to have some summary of the previous talk. Today, inshallah, we'll start off with Uthman bin Affan's closeness to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is a little bit of a continuation from previous week's talk as well. We talked about Uthman bin Affan was referred as Dhun Nurain, meaning a possessor of two lights. As one of the understanding was that Uthman bin Affan was the only person in the history from Adam alayhi salam to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who married to two daughters of a prophet. So that's why he was referred as Dhun Nurain, the carrier or possessor of two lights, Ruqayya and Kulthum radiallahu anhuma. Now, that's one aspect of it. But that aspect shows that his close ties with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And after he made migration to Habasha and came back, after that, he was always stayed close to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of his relationship as the Sahar Rasulullah, meaning that the son-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But besides that, just to learn the deen from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it says that the starting point of Uthman's education came when he met Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and underwent a great change from shirk. Yani, of course, he is not one of those people who worship the idols, but the lifestyle is still without Islam, from kufr to Islam. So the whole time he continued to learn from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is why we find that he he bears so many hardships in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he ended up even migrating to Habasha. It's I think when we read some of these stories, we don't realize that what it really means. We have to put ourselves some time to think about it, put ourselves in their shoes. That what does it mean sometimes? Think about yourself. Just because you cannot, the hardship that you bear because you're saying La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, to the point that the whole life that you have spent in a place, you end up leaving that place. Meaning you're disconnecting from your family, your friends, and whatsoever you were aware of, even probably the language that you were speaking, that you will go to the area where people do not even that language over there. They don't even speak the language. So it's a complete fresh start that you have to start over there. That itself is a very difficult thing to do. It's important to put ourselves in those shoes sometime, then think about it, not just read as a story and carry on. Then Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he, in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when meaning after Rasulullah migrated from Mecca to Medina, all the battles happened during that time. So Uthman in general was present in all the major battlefield that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam participated, and we'll talk about one by one inshallah today. But besides that, he was also present in all the other kind of dealings that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was doing. Hence, we should we realize that how Uthman was prepared to become the Khalifa later on. Why the Sahaba Ridwanullah alayhim were they were so keen to elect him as the Khalifa later on, after Abu Bakr and Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhuma, they passed away. This is because of the qualities that Uthman carried, but the qualities that he carried is because of his close connection to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his actions during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, in the time of Battle of Badr, what happened was, this was in the second year after the Hijrah, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sahaba, about 300 plus Sahaba, some reports say 313, some say 317, whatever the number was, a little bit over 300 people. So from Ansar and Muhajirin. They were going out, they were after a caravan of Abu Sufyan. There was an intent that was shown, and Sahaba were along with them. And Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he wanted to go as well. Of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept that to himself, that he was after the ghazwa, the battle that was going to happen against the Meccans, because Abu Jahl brought an army to fight against the Muslims, and he was there to basically eradicate the Muslims from the face of the earth. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took the decision by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he was going after the Abu Jahl and his army. Now, when Uthman, he wanted to go with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's a key thing to remember. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam abstained him. He said not to go because Ruqayya radiallahu anha, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was very sick. Because one of the reports that she had measles, and she was very sick. She was bedridden, and she needed somebody to take care of her. Hence, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded Uthman. See, when Uthman is staying behind, it's not because he did not want to participate in the battle or to go after the caravan. This is the key thing to remember here, and this is what some of the Orientalists, they played around to create some sort of doubts in the hearts of the believers, by saying as if Uthman was scared, or Uthman was he was not the one who wanted to go and fight. That's not the case. What we have to remember as a Muslim is how important that is to follow the command of Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because when Rasulullah is commanding something, that must be followed, not because only as a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also he was the hakim, the ruler over the Muslimin as well. So the ta'ah, the obedience, is a must. So Uthman was commanded by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to stay behind and take care of Ruqayya radiallahu anha, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she was so sick that her sickness grew to the point that she passed away in the sickness. And the report talks that she wanted to see her father, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She wanted to see her other sister Zainab radiallahu anha. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed something else for Ruqayya radiallahu anha, to the point that she passed away, and she was even buried before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned back from Badr. And later on, of course, Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he is the one who followed the janazah and did the burial and all those things. Now, later on, when Yazid ibn al-Haritha came riding a camel of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to bring the news about the Badr, the success of the Muslims against the Kuffar, what happened to the Kuffar, Abu Jahl's army, and it was many of those leaders were killed or captured. He came with the great news. At the same time, Muslims were, of course, they were rejoicing, they were happy what happened, but at the same time, Uthman bin Affan was going through very difficult times, a sorrow time of losing his wife and the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ruqayya radiallahu anha. Now, she was buried in Jannat al-Baqi, and al-Baqi, the graveyard of al-Baqi. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned back, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to the grave and he made the dua for his daughter Ruqayya radiallahu anha. So now, when it talks about, as I said, this is the incident that happened for the Badr, and those people who have grudge against Uthman radiallahu anh, whether whosoever they are, including the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mustashriqeen, which are the Orientalists, or the people who are doing false propaganda, they said many things about Uthman bin Affan regarding this thing, while the reality is that Uthman bin Affan, not only that he stayed behind, but he stayed behind because Ruqayya was sick, the daughter of Rasulullah, and also he was commanded. Because he was commanded, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as one of the hadith mentions, he says, "Laka ajru rajulin shahida badran wa sahmu." Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Uthman that you have the reward of the person who participated in the Badr, and you get the share from the Badr as well. So that shows that Uthman bin Affan was, in that sense, he was the participant of the Badr. Now, there is an incident that has mentioned that the Abdullah ibn Mawhab, Uthman ibn Abdullah ibn Mawhab, he came from Egypt to perform the Hajj of the Kaaba. There was a later time, and he said to Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anh, he said, "Oh Ibn Umar, I'm going to ask you about something, so tell me." And he said, "I adjure you by Allah and the sanctity of this house. So tell me the truth, what you're going to tell me." So he's asking about the incident of Uthman bin Affan did not participate in the Badr. So he said, "Do you know that Uthman was absent from the Badr and did not witness it?" And for that, Abdullah bin Umar, radiallahu anhuma, he said, "Yes, but his absence from Badr was because he was married to the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ruqayya, and she fell sick, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded that." And he mentioned this hadith on that laka ajru rajulin shahida badra wa sahmuhu, that for you there is a reward for the one who participated in the Badr and will get the share. And that's what happened to Uthman bin Affan from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there is another narration about the same report that says that Abu Wa'il reported that Uthman bin Affan said, "On the day of Badr, I stayed behind to take care, look after the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave me the share." Uthman actually was saying that he even got the share. That shows that he was one of those people who, in that sense, participated in the Badr. But the point is not that physically he was there or not. He was excused by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, another incident that is also used against Uthman bin Affan, it should be clarified, it's important to be clarified about Uthman, is the incident of Ghazwatu Uhud. In the Uhud, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he placed 50 archers at one of the points where there was a weak spot that the kuffar could have entered from there and attacked them from the back. Now, those 50 archers were told by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, commanded by him, that do not leave that spot, even if we win, and even if you see that we win the war, we lose. We are dead to the point, even you see that the birds are coming, the vultures are coming and eating from our bodies, do not leave the spot. That kind of a statement was given to them. And then the fight started, and it went into a direction that Muslims were winning. Okay, the battle was almost won by the Muslims, the Uhud. And those 50 archers, they thought of it that the battle is over, and because they were told not to move until Rasulullah said so. But Rasulullah did not tell them to move, but they moved. Hence, Khalid bin Walid, who was not a Muslim at that time, and Ikrimah, who was also not a Muslim. Both of them were not Muslim at that time. And Khalid was the leader of one of the leaders of the army of the Kuffar. He realized that the weak spot is open, and he took some of some part of the army, and then they attacked from the back, and that caused a great chaos. Many of the Muslims were martyred, and to the point there was a rumor that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was martyred as well. Okay, and when this rumor was spread, Ibn Qamiyah was the one who said he killed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he started swearing. And but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was still alive, though, of course. But what happened was, out of that, the Muslims kind of got into three different distinct groups. One, they continued to fight. They said they're going to continue to fight no matter what. There was another group who was in a complete confusion. And the third group was, they turned their backs and they ran towards Medina. And Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh was part of them. Okay, so Uthman was part of them, and this is another thing that was used against Uthman bin Affan. But the point here is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that group of people, the one who turned their backs. In Surah Al-Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَلَّوْا مِنْكُمْ يَوْمَ التَّقَى الْجَمْعَانِ إِنَّمَا اسْتَزَلَّهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ بِبَعْدِ مَا كَسَبُوا وَلَقَدْ عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those of you who turned back on the day of the two hosts meeting at the battle of the Uhud, and it was Shaitan who caused them to backslide, run away from the battlefield. Of course, this is not allowed in Islam. But in this specific case, it says, because some sins they had earned, but Allah indeed has forgiven them. Allah forgave this specific group of people, talking about the one who turned their back. They were Sahaba, including Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafurun Halim. He is the one who is forgiving, most forbearing. Now, the question here is, nobody is disagreeing that Uthman was part of the group who turned their backs. But the point here is, Allah Azza wa Jal himself addressed that point. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave the whole group who turned their backs. But the ones who want to build a case against Uthman, they only pinpoint Uthman bin Affan, even though there were other Sahaba also among them. Why Uthman bin Affan is the only name to be mentioned here? Because there is some case they wanted to build against Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh. But the point is not that he did not do this action, which is considered as a sinful action. But the point here is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive it. If Allah, the Almighty, if He forgive the sin that was done by the Sahaba there at this action, or the action that was done, I would not say use the word sin, but the action that was done by the Sahaba, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them. If Allah forgave them, then what's the point of bringing this up again and again? That's one point. Second point, Uthman bin Affan was not the only one who left. There was a group of Sahaba. And if even among the group, Uthman would have stayed there and the rest of them were gone, what would Uthman could have done alone? But on top of it, the main thing to remember here is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave the whole group that showed their backs in that instance. So that was about the Ghazwat al-Uhud, and it's good to remember that from the we have to know the perspective, we have to know the reason, we have to know how, in what circumstances something has happened. Like we talked about the Badr. In the case of the Badr, it was a valid reason given to Uthman bin Affan by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As a matter of fact, it's a command. Even the one who participated, that's a command they follow. The one who were told to abstain, that's a command. In both cases, it's a command from Allah subhanahu Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be followed. So that cannot be used as anything against Uthman bin Affan radiallahu. And the second one, because Allah forgave all of them, then who are we to accuse him or any of those Sahaba who were part of that? So this is how we are supposed to look at the instances. So we should not be looking at one incident or any of those incidents without the context and what happened, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's judgment was, if there was any already given. So this is from that angle, Uthman was forgiven like the rest of the Sahaba about this action. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's another ghazwa or campaign was against the Ghatafan, and that was the Emir, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam set out with 400 men and a number of horses. And in this case, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left Uthman bin Affan as the caretaker or the in charge of Medina. We were just having some discussion prior to this, and that's part of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grooming the Sahaba for the task they were going to face in the future. So Uthman was left as an in charge, and that's what we see at different occasions. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left different Sahaba to be taking care of different things, whether it's taking care of Medina in his absence, or in anything that he was taking care of. He left the people or assigned the job to the people who were good at that, or Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was preparing for certain tasks. Okay, so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left Uthman bin Affan here, and in that battle, what happened was they captured a mushrik, a man from Dhul Qussa, whose name was Jabbar, and he was from Banu Thalaba. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was taking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told them some information about his people. He said, they will never meet you in the battle. When they hear about it, they will just go to the mountain tops. They will run away from you. They will not fight with you if you want to fight with them. And he said, and I will go with you. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he called him towards Islam, and he became a Muslim, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made him as a brother to Bilal radiallahu anhu. This is one of the things that used to happen, that you are making a brother to somebody. So there's you are leaving him with somebody who is teaching him Islam as well. And besides that, of course, he can be taken care of if he is in need. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not meet anybody in this battle, and they returned back. And we find these kind of incidents happen in Rasulullah sometime. But when this happened, the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was absent for 11 days. And those 11 days, Uthman bin Affan was a caretaker of Medina. Okay, so this is a big thing to remember, because these are the kind of situations that are used to prepare the leadership, the coming leadership as well. And the similar kind of a thing that happened was with the campaign of the Riqa, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that in this case he heard that some group from Ghatafan was one of the tribes. Was one of the tribes of the Thalaba and Anmar, and they wanted to attack Medina now. So he set out 400 of his soldiers, and when they reached Sirar, before he left Rasulullah sallallahu again, he left Uthman bin Affan is the one who was the caretaker of Medina again in this situation again. And Uthman was not the only one, by the way, was assigned this kind of job. We find Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu was left. Suhaib Rumi was left as caretaker of Medina. There was an instance when Abdullah ibn Maktoum was left as a caretaker of Medina. So there are different Sahaba Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to assign to prepare different Sahaba for the job in front of them in the later future. Now here Uthman was left as in charge again. Now in this case, the Muslims encountered a huge group from Ghatafan, and when they go closer to them, the people were afraid of one another until Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam led the people. And when Rasulullah was leading the prayers, because a fight was going on, and during the fight, the people were scared, so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed along with them Salatul Khawf. Salatul Khawf is a prayer which is, for example, there's a time for Salat al-Dhuhr or Asr or Fajr, whichever Salah time is there, and you are engaged in fight. So Salah is so important that even when you engage in fight, you cannot miss the Salah. You still have to do your Salah as the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded. So that time Salatul Khawf was prayed, and Salatul Khawf is, from the fiqh perspective, that can be looked into if anybody's interested later on, that how the Salatul Khawf is done. But it's a different way of doing the prayer than a regular way when we pray in our peacetime. So at this time again, Uthman bin Affan was the caretaker of the Medina. Rasulullah was away from Medina for 15 days. So before it was 11 days, this time it was 15 days, and so on and so forth. We find different Sahaba were left behind to take care of the affairs of the state at that. When we say Medina, what means by that is you are caretaker of the state at that time. That was a headquarter of the state in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So inshallah, there are a couple of more campaigns like this that includes Hudaybiyah, which is a very important one. Uthman bin Affan is the one who was thought of it as if he was martyred. Hence, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took the bay'ah, bay'atul Ridwan, or the bay'ah under the tree, also is referred as. So, role of Uthman will be discussed, inshallah, in accordance with that, and also about his role in Ghazwat Tabuk, which was a battle Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or Ghazwa that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam waged against the Roman Empire at that time. Roman Empire was one of the superpowers of that time. There were two superpowers, Persians and the Romans, and Rasulullah went after the Romans with an army of about 30,000. One of the biggest army Rasulullah went with. That was the biggest army, as a matter of fact. So we'll talk about that, inshallah, next week. We'll stop today's talk here, inshallah. And if there's any questions or comments, I will